Hey everyone, welcome back. Are you ready to dive in?
Always. What are we digging into today?
Today we're taking a trip with the Opium Diaries by David Jimenez.
Oh, interesting. What's the book about?
So Jimenez basically retraces the steps of these famous authors across Asia
Okay.
and tries to figure out what they discovered about the secret of the East.
The Secret of the East. That's pretty ambitious, don't you think?
Right, but that's what makes it so intriguing. He's following in the footsteps of Somerset Maugham, Joseph Conrad, Rudyard Kipling.
Wow, some real literary heavyweights there.
Exactly. And he's looking for those hidden truths, those insights that maybe they glimpsed but couldn't fully grasp.
And how does he go about that?
Well, that's what's so clever about the book. He doesn't just retell their stories. He weaves in his own present-day experiences in these same places.
Oh, I see. So it's like a conversation between past and present, between their perspectives and his.
Yeah. And it's not just about these famous authors, it's about the places themselves. Bustling Bangkok, the wilds of Borneo, even the heights of Tibet. He goes everywhere.
Wow, what a range. So are we talking like a travelogue, a history lesson? What?
It's kind of a blend, but it goes deeper than that. It's more about the search for meaning, for understanding. You know that feeling you get when you travel, that sense of wonder, that desire to connect with something bigger than yourself?
Amen.
That's what Jimenez is chasing. And along the way, he uncovers these fascinating connections between history, culture, and the human experience.
I'm intrigued. So where do we start?
Our first stop is Indochina with, drumroll please, Somerset Maugham.
Oh, Maugham,
Uh-huh.
the master of cynicism. I've always loved his sharp wit.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. And in a way, his travels were an attempt to escape that cynicism, to find meaning in a world that often seemed meaningless to him.
I can relate to that. Travel is a search for something.
And there's this amazing anecdote in the book about Maugham in a Bangkok opium den. He's talking to this seasoned traveler who dreams of going back home, pockets full of rubies, head full of stories to impress everyone back home.
Haha, classic. We've all met someone like that, haven't we? Or maybe even felt that way ourselves after a trip.
Totally. It's that desire to capture the essence of a place, to bottle it up and bring it back with us. But here's the thing. Maugham seems to be saying that sometimes, especially in a place as romanticized as the East, that search for authenticity can be its own kind of illusion.
That's a good point. Like, we go looking for something specific, but maybe what we find is something else entirely.
Well,
Or maybe it was within us all along.
exactly. So it makes you wonder, are we chasing shadows when we travel? Are we trying to force our own narratives onto these places instead of letting them speak for themselves?
It's something to consider, for sure. How do we approach a new place with open eyes, ready to learn and experience, without falling into the trap of expecting it to be something it's not?
Such a good question. And it's something we'll be grappling with as we continue our journey through the Opium Diaries. But for now, I think we need to take a break, process all these insightful thoughts.
Sounds like a plan. I'm already hooked.
All right, so from the sultry haze of Indochina, we're switching gears completely.
Where to next?
Get ready for some serious altitude because we're heading to the Himalayas.
Oh, wow. Okay. Roof of the world. Who's our guide?
With us is Alexandra David Neal. Talk about a woman ahead of her time.
What did she do?
So picture this. Early 1900s, most Westerners, women especially, wouldn't even dream of going to Tibet. But she decides she has to go.
What made her so determined?
She was drawn to Tibetan Buddhism, wanted to experience it at its source, but Tibet wasn't exactly welcoming to outsiders back then.
So how'd she pull it off?
She basically disguised herself as a man, even adopted a Tibetan teenager to pose as her son for protection.
You're kidding. That's incredible and kind of ballsy, right?
Totally. She endured freezing temps, treacherous mountain passes, even bandits, all to reach Lhasa.
Wow, that takes serious dedication. Her writing must be incredible.
Oh, it is. She doesn't just describe the journey, though. She spent years studying with Tibetan lamas, meditating in monasteries, really immersing herself.
So she wasn't just there as a tourist.
Not at all. But, and here's where it gets interesting, she also saw Tibet through clear eyes. It wasn't all blissful enlightenment. She wrote about the poverty she saw, the strict social structures, the challenges of living in such a harsh environment.
That's important. It's easy to romanticize these far-off places.
Exactly. David Neal reminds us that even in the places we dream of, reality is always more complex. But she never loses that sense of wonder either, that deep respect for Tibetan culture.
Okay, I'm adding her to my reading list. What a powerful story.
From the heights of Tibet, we find ourselves right in the thick of World War II.
Oh, wow. That's quite a jump. Who are we following now?
This time, it's Martha Gellhorn, one of the first female war correspondents ever.
Wow, that's during a time when women just weren't doing that kind of work.
Exactly. She was fearless. Reported from the front lines in Spain, China, even Vietnam during the war.
What was so special about her writing?
She had this incredible ability to capture the big picture, the chaos and violence of war, but also those small human moments that often get overlooked.
Yeah, those details that make it real.
Exactly. Like there's this almost funny story in the book about her struggling to find a decent bathroom in the middle of war-torn China.
I mean, some things never change, right?
Right. It's those little details that make her writing so relatable. But she also doesn't shy away from the horrors she witnessed. She wanted people to understand the true cost of war.
That's a powerful reminder, especially today.
Now, speaking of powerful stories, let's talk Graham Greene. Specifically, his novel, The Quiet American.
Okay, I've heard of it. It's set during the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah. And Greene does this amazing job of capturing the mood, the atmosphere of Vietnam in the 1950s. It's like you can feel the tension, the uncertainty, just reading his words.
What's the story about?
It's a love triangle, but also a commentary on the war itself. There's this British journalist, a Vietnamese woman, and an American aid worker. As the story unfolds, Greene forces you to question everyone's motives. Nothing is black and white.
Sounds intense.
It is, and it makes you think about the unintended consequences of getting involved in other countries' conflicts. Even with good intentions, things can go so wrong.
That's a lesson we seem to have to keep relearning, unfortunately.
Sadly, yeah. From the complexities of Vietnam, Jimenez takes us on this whirlwind adventure with Manu Liguenes.
Who was he? Another writer.
Yeah, a Spanish journalist known for his crazy adventures and his talent for storytelling.
Okay, so what did he do?
In his book, The Shortest Route, he decides to retrace Magellan's expedition across Asia. But, get this, by land.
By land. That's insane. Magellan sailed around the world.
I know, right? But Liguenes actually did it. Traveled through Vietnam during the war, the jungles of Borneo, even crossed the Himalayas on foot. And he writes about it all with this infectious enthusiasm.
He sounds like quite a character.
Oh, he was. Though it's worth mentioning, some of his accounts have been questioned for their accuracy. Seems like he might have embellished some details for a better story.
That's a good reminder that we always have to be careful about taking things at face value, even when we're reading something we enjoy.
Absolutely. Always good to have a critical eye. Speaking of which, for our last stop before we wrap up, we're heading to Japan.
Okay. Who are we spending time with in Japan?
A Swiss writer and photographer named Nicolas Bouvier. He lived in Japan in the 1950s, right after World War II, a time of huge change for the country.
What was so special about his experience?
Bouvier was different from some of the other travelers we've discussed. He didn't have this big, ambitious quest. He was content to just observe, to immerse himself in the culture, and to let Japan reveal itself to him in its own time.
It's kind of beautiful, actually.
It is. He had this quiet, contemplative style, both in his writing and his photography. He was drawn to the beauty of everyday life in Japan. The gardens, the temples, the bustling streets.
It sounds like he found a different kind of secret of the East than some of the others.
I think so. He shows us that sometimes the most profound discoveries happen when we slow down, pay attention to the details, and let go of our need to control the experience.
That's a good lesson for all of us.
You know, it's funny, isn't it? We talk about this secret of the East, but maybe it's not something you find, like some hidden treasure. Maybe it's more about how these places change us.
That's a good point. It's not just about the destination, it's about the journey itself, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to our final companion in the Opium Diaries, a journalist who truly embraced that transformative power of travel, Tiziano Terzani.
Okay, I'm not as familiar with Terzani. What made him different?
He was all about slow, deliberate travel, really immersing himself in the places he visited. In fact, he once spent an entire year traveling through Asia without ever getting on a plane.
Wow, no planes. That's hardcore. What was the point of that?
He believed that to truly understand a place, you had to experience it on its own terms, to be open to those chance encounters and unexpected detours.
I can see that. It's easy to get caught up in the tourist bubble, following the same itineraries as everyone else.
Exactly. And for Terzani, Thailand became a microcosm of those challenges.
Thailand. What was it about Thailand that drew him in?
It was a country caught between the old and the new, struggling to balance its rich traditions with the pressures of modernization.
That tension between tradition and progress is something a lot of places are grappling with.
Right. And it's something we see reflected in a lot of the authors we've discussed today.
So did Terzani ever find his secret of the East in Thailand?
I don't think he was ever looking for easy answers, but he did observe something really interesting. He said, tourists are like invaders, taking pictures of the natives like they were animals.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. What do you think he meant by that?
I think he was challenging us to examine our own motivations when we travel. Are we approaching these places with respect and humility, or are we just there to consume, to check things off a list?
That's something we should all ask ourselves no matter where we're traveling to.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Opium Diaries, what stands out to you as the most important takeaway?
After hearing about all these different writers and their experiences, I'm struck by how there isn't one single East. It's such a diverse and ever-changing region shaped by countless cultures and histories.
That's so true. And I think that's the beauty of a book like this. It doesn't try to give us all the answers. It just offers these glimpses, these different perspectives, and invites us to keep exploring.
And maybe that's the real secret of the East, the understanding that the journey itself is the reward.
Beautifully said. It's about embracing the unknown, being open to new experiences, and letting go of our need to have all the answers.
Exactly. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners plenty to ponder.
We definitely have. So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep those adventurous spirits alive.